breaking news out of Havana, the death of Fidel Castro. The college activist who became a rebel, who became president, the de facto dictator of Cuba, dead tonight at the age of 90. The announcement made this evening by Cuba's president and Castro's younger brother, Raul. No word yet on the cause of death. Barely a whisper on the streets of Cuba since the announcement was made on state television. But a very different scene here in the U.S. Take a look at Miami's Little Havana at this hour. Cars lining the street, young and old waving the Cuban flag, honking car horns, chants of freedom. To his supporters, Castro was a hero of the Cold War, a socialist with swagger. But to his enemies, and there were many in the West, he was a cold-blooded killer who ruled by force, who crushed the dreams of Cuba's people for generations. More now from ABC's Jim Avila.
For a half-century, Fidel Castro ruled Cuba while the world changed around him. 50 years of isolation finally ended only after he left power, and only with his tacit blessing. Castro remained skeptical and suspicious of the U.S. right up to his death, defiantly commenting after President Obama's historic visit that Cuba will never forget the Bay of Pigs invasion and does not need America. His defense of his communist revolution never faltering.
I am a communist, a Marxist, socialist communist. I am not afraid to say I am a communist.
Fidel Castro was born in 1926 out of wedlock to a wealthy Cuban landowner and his maid. He went to Catholic schools and then studied law. His two passions were baseball, he was very good at it, and politics. He became an activist for the poor and working class. In 1956, after being expelled by Cuba's American-supported dictator Fulgencio Batista, Castro returned secretly with his brother Raul, Argentinian Marxist rebel leader Che Guevara, and others. They hid out in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, from which they waged a guerrilla war.
The road to Havana paved with glory for rebel chieftain Fidel Castro.
Castro finally expelled Batista and took over. Fidel had promised democracy, but squashed all dissent with jail or expulsions, even executions. He nationalized all U.S. businesses. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy, just elected, approved a CIA-trained invasion force of 1,300 Cuban exiles who went ashore at the Bay of Pigs. Castro demolished them. A huge propaganda victory. In 1962, American spy planes discovered Castro had let the Soviets put nuclear missiles in Cuba.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Yes, we were very close to the nuclear war, extremely close.
Ultimately, the Soviets removed the missiles. Fidel continued to promote leftist movements in Latin America, where he remained popular until his death. Even Castro's critics praised his advances in healthcare and in education. But the inefficiency of Cuba's Soviet-style economy produced dissent. In 1980, more than 125,000 Cubans, some expelled, many allowed to just leave, braved rough seas and dehydration to come to the United States in the Mariel boat lift. In the early 1990s, the fall of the USSR cost Cuba billions of dollars in Soviet aid and trade, leading to widespread shortages and rationing.
La desaparición de la Unión Soviética.
With the demise of the Soviet Union, we have suffered the equivalent to a treason. We have felt betrayed.
Castro fought back by courting tourism and business. In 2006, just before intestinal surgery, he gave up power temporarily to his younger brother Raul. He never took the reins again, made it official in 2008, but he was not totally gone. Started writing newspaper columns, receiving visitors, including Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. Then suddenly, in the summer of 2010, he began displaying his indomitable drive again in public, giving TV interviews, laying flowers at the tomb of the fallen, exhorting the communist youth, and addressing the Cuban parliament. Now the world will see how a new era of Cuban-American diplomacy changes his island home, with Fidel Castro gone, and the Americans gradually returning. It may be no longer Fidel Castro's Cuba.
Our thanks to Jim Avila for that report.